Okay, well, thanks for coming to this impromptu extra session that was put in a bit late in the programme. But what I want to talk about is some successes we've had recently with a new partner. And I'm Richard Self. I'm one of the senior lecturers in the school Department of Computing and Maths. And I run a module which is used by BAC in Bangladesh. And I want to talk a little bit about how we can achieve some rather interesting successes in terms of developing really great student achievement. And one of our challenges in partnerships is this one: student experience similarity across cultures, across the world. And because we can do some things which we can develop innovative ways of looking at teaching and learning, and it's sometimes quite tricky to transfer that within the university to other colleagues, and it must be an incredible challenge for some of you guys, the other side of the world, trying to understand what it is we're doing. I mean, we've all had the challenge of suddenly a module gets dumped on us that someone else has been teaching for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and suddenly all we have is a set of slides, or sets of slides. And maybe a module handbook and one or two other things. And it's, how do I pick up this new module, probably with very little interaction with previous colleagues, and how do I actually deliver a really great experience? It gets even more tricky if the previous module leader has come up with some really innovative, different ways of doing the teaching and driving the learning and assessment of the students. It can be very challenging within an institution and across institutions, across cultures, with different learning cultures. It can become quite remarkably tricky. Now, what I've been doing for the last 2, 3 years is changing my complete approach. Many colleagues are comfortable being academic as a domain expert. They know everything about the particular topic that they're teaching. Now, what that leads to is a behaviour that says, I'm an expert. I've got to get my knowledge into the heads of all of these students because it's really interesting to me. I love this topic. And I've got to fill their heads with all of this knowledge. Now, in the UK, over the years, we've discovered that this approach to teaching tends to, among other things, tends to lead to a black minority ethnic international student grade deficit problem. But in some institutions, as bad as 25% less grades, marks for the BMAI group. I have no idea what it's like in partners overseas. So we have the traditional, what you could call the didactic form of teaching. These are the facts, these are the answers, this is how it all works, folks. What I've done with tremendous assistance and support from my boss here, Richard Hill, has been to change the way I look at things, the way I look at who I am, how I behave with my students and so on. What I've changed to is that. I have no particular necessary expertise in any particular domain, but what it appears that I have is a learning to learn skills expert. I facilitate learning. I challenge the students. They learn by doing research. Whether it's first year, first semester, first 6 weeks, second year, third year, final year, masters. They learn by doing their research based on the ideas I give them. These are interesting aspects of this particular subject. Go find out, folks. Go do. It leads to, in Derby, on my modules, and I've gone back now over the last 3 years, doing some learning analytics, and I've written a chapter for an edited book which is coming out later on this year on this whole approach, changing styles and using learning analytics, looking at the numbers, looking at the statistics, sorting out what's going on. It also leads to amazingly good work, where the first, second or third year, all of my modules lead to publishable e-journal, e-book work. Now, if we go back a little bit, one of the things is going back quite a few thousand years, Plutarch, slightly amended, he said education is not filling leaky buckets, but lighting fires of enthusiasm. It's changing the way our students think about what we're doing, how they relate to us as teachers or as facilitators. It relates to all sorts of interesting things, and suddenly, if they do the research, they're doing the learning. Those leaky buckets become magically healed. It's unbelievable what happens. And I love these two Einstein things. Imagination is more important than knowledge, and knowledge is limiting, but imagination is infinite. And I love this one. I feel so much like that. I have no specific talent, special talent. I'm only passionately curious. The students do know that about me. I am interested in anything and everything. They can ask me about almost anything and get, they feel, a sensible answer. Yeah, we can lead our horses to water, but we can lead our students to the material, but we cannot make them learn. That's one thing. So stop thinking about how to make them learn. Think about another aspect. If you are the learning skills expert, you now no longer worry about, I've got to fill every single contact hour with teaching to kit stuff into their heads. If I feel I need to cancel all teaching for a couple of weeks, so I can see every student for 15 minutes in my office do a formative review of their, what you might call, final draft before they submit it, that's incredibly valuable. It leads to astonishingly high levels of achievement and very, very high satisfaction by and large. So, a new way of doing things, very, very different from most people, most of our colleagues. Came across one actually accidentally a couple of days ago who uses a very similar sort of approach, and he also has incredibly high levels of achievement in his domestic modules. The question is, how do I get that across to our partners who are running my modules? Because this is a different way of teaching to what most people do. So my LTA approach, learning, teaching, assessment approach, is very much around research-based learning. I give a lot of guidance about learning to learn skills, about writing skills, research skills, all of those sort of things. I spend a lot of time in one-to-one with my students. You know, we've got our maximum 20 students in a workshop or a tutorial. That gives me 2, 3, 4 minutes a week with each student. Also, let's say, week 8 or 9, 15 minutes with each student about where they've got to, their ideas, their formatting of the presentation and so on. So they're probably getting, and then at the end of the semester, week 12 or perhaps during the exam period, again, 15-minute schedule to do the final summative assessment of their assignments. I also give very, very broad topics for their assignments. And then they negotiate the narrow topic that they're going to address in the assignment. I use very, very clear and simple form of marking criteria, the top end of which relates very, very tightly and strongly to criteria that many of us are used to in terms of the work we do, where we're working on program committees or we're working on editorial committees for journals and so on. So you'll see a little bit in a minute what I mean by clarity, simplicity. It'll also have an interesting advantage. This avoids the problem of renormalizing grades if they look quite high. As I said, formalised final draft assignment review round about week 8 or so. They got full marking, using the criteria, extra comments and so on turn it in, and then they have around about 4 weeks to go away and finish off the assignment to a decent quality. And then, for all 5 modules that I teach at the moment, there is an e-book of the best work. So that for first year, anybody getting 60% and above, their articles are then co-edited by one of the students into an e-book. For second year, 65% plus. Final year, 70% plus. So I'm publishing 5 e-books each year. Those now form the basis of the reading list, as you might say, for next year's students. The point about that is that there is no book, 1 book or 2 books, which actually provide a good enough background as a reading list. Whereas these articles, particular final year ones, provide a very broad coverage of how to do critical thinking, critical analysis of sources, and synthesis and so on. The one I'm looking at is a module called Enterprise Systems, which we have 9 students this year in Derby because it's an option with another module which I co-taught. We've got 10 students in BAC, and that is the title of the assignment. Big Data for SMEs, Questions of Opportunities, Challenges, Benefits and Operations. This is leading edge material. This is stuff that no one is publishing about. This is stuff that I'm leading in terms of my extracurricular stuff, in terms of conference chairing and so on. This is a big problem, big issues. We're looking at what can they do with it. And they will then, the students will spend a week or 2 researching broad topic, and then they will find something that's really interesting to them, that they're passionately interested in. So there's that connection suddenly between the assignment that they've negotiated with me and the work that they're going to research and come up with some interesting ideas. So how did I transfer all of this across to BAC? Well, very, very early on, all the teaching materials went across there. And then, because we run in Derby about 1 or 2, 3 weeks ahead of BAC, I was videoing all of my seminars, all my workshops, everything. See, I'm recording this as well because I don't get on well with Penopto, but I might prefer video because then people can see my body language while I'm talking as well. If you go to these links, and by the way, this presentation is already up on my website, so you can get hold of the actual stuff, and we'll be adding this video over the next week or so onto our YouTube channel, which is our Department of Computing and Maths YouTube channel, where you'll find lots and lots of material. And there is what we currently are doing. You can see we've got staff seminars, admittedly only 1 or 2 there. We've got a module which is a first year module, subjects of computer science. This is my ISA, Information Security and Assurance, and Enterprise Systems module here. Some stuff that another colleague puts up there fairly regularly. And then this was a first year module I ran this semester. These are another set of teaching materials for another first year module, second year module, the third year module. I think BAC will be running next year. And then this is our guest lectures for first year students. And so we're videoing as much as we can, so it's available there for students who don't turn up. But it's also seriously valuable, which is this one, they're getting across to a partner what's going on, what it is I'm trying to get at, how I'm actually delivering the material. And I just gone into the one, and you can see that they've had about 6 sessions to help them. These are the ones which are the substantive work in the module, mostly to do with the way of approaching communication, the way to think about doing research, things like that. Because this module is a capstone module where the students are integrating everything that they have learned in their career to date. And then from that, addressing one little problem. And so one of the weeks, which is missing week 5, was because we had a poster presentation. Students wrote and produced an infographic which was why this particular subject is important. And the students assessed it, and I moderated with some of my colleagues. Now, marking criteria is another thing that's quite important. In terms of employability, we are using, or I'm using, 20% of the grade comes from strict adherence to presentation standards, such as using the Springer or the IEEE template perfectly, which is kind of difficult, but they've got to learn it. They've got to learn to use templates, because when they get out into the big wide world, there will be templates. And so I then show them how they will lose marks hand over fist if they're not careful. And it's here we can get 10, 20, 30% improvement at the formative review, just pointing out the fact they haven't met this criterion or that criterion. And in Derby, the recovery is that almost all students get 100% of it. So they got 20% in the bag before they start writing anything else. Now, here are the 3 or 4 top levels. The 95% band, the 85%, the 75%, and the 65%. Now, remember I mentioned earlier on about the fact that many of us are evaluating papers for journals and so on. So we understand quite well what is publishable at an international workshop or an international conference, national or our own local university type research conferences. Novelty is another thing. I have a short paper, short sort of checklist that students on these 2 modules have to use to work out how novel their topic is. I try to set topics which allow them to get to leading edge stuff that could be published right up at international workshop level. Now, having something like this, rather than the sort of more usual excellent for the level, or satisfactory for the level, or very good for the level, which is kind of very, very subjective, if you end up with lots and lots of your, so if you end up with an average grade of 75%, the external has no good reason for not saying you've got to normalise that back to a sort of a median or an average of, let's say, 60% or something. All my external examiners have bought into this, so even if the average grade is 75%, which it is, or even 78%, they have no grounds to renormalise. What's the results? The results are very simple. The formative review improves grades on average in Derby by 15 to 18%. Those are the module average grades, 73 to 78%. Quite high for undergraduates, levels of cited sources. Almost eliminates failure. By publishing their work on our website, they have publication items or entries for their CV, and those who do the editing of, and collecting together editing and so on of all of the articles also obviously have editorial rights in their CV, which is kind of unusual, because if our undergraduate students on the BSc program who cover all of those modules, they've all got potentially 5 citations or 5 publications in their CV before they leave the university. What other universities deliver that for their students? And because they have learned to cope with and sort out and use templates, which are often very, very slippery, they now are much more employable. Here is our open journal system, and you'll see that's the first year module. This is one that where we publish these are the top dissertations each year from computing and maths, or computing. 70% and above, we will publish them there. That's Tommy Thompson's game behaviour. He publishes some of their articles there. And then these ones are my other modules. First run at BAC delivers a profile which is nearly identical to Derby. Not quite, but darn nearly. I've not seen that before with partnership. I think they have done stunningly well. Numbers of references, so that's, you might say this is an index number for the student. And so we had in Derby, the lowest number of references was 14 or so. BAC 20, so they're doing better. Quality is pretty impressive. And how many 2,500 word assignments at undergraduate level have you ever seen with 30 sources? Mostly, that is a reasonable dissertation of 10,000 words. So this is showing how much research they're doing. In principle, because of the way it's taught, they could have 150, 200 sources available to them. And they've chosen those ones. Now, if we look at what happened in terms of the average marks across the various parts of the marking rubric. Presentation, which is worth 20%, in Derby we had an average of 98.8%, so everybody got 100% except for one, I think it was, who was a bit careless. This is where one of the first challenges is. We need to get BAC back up to the full 100% on their presentation, because that's worth another 30, that's worth 6 more points on their grade. So we can do that. In terms of the argument and in terms of the topic, pretty close. So the average is, and this actually reflects a lot of part of that. In fact, if we've got the extra 6 points on there by doing perfect presentation, that would have gone up to 71% roughly. Improvements. In Derby we get 16% improvement there, we did 9 when they could have got a lot more. They could have got 25% there plus. The formative to summative, not bad, pretty close. So the challenges. Well, we're doing, I think, Sustainable Information Corporate Governance next semester, which has more concentration on the concepts and the main challenges and questions in the subject. So that shouldn't be too difficult, but we need to move that, get rid of that presentation deficit and work subtly on some of their critical thinking, critical analysis skills. But that's the big problem. That is easy to fix. The students have gone through that once, they now just need to buy into it and fix it. Because remember, my students have been working with this presentation approach for 2 years. So they've got a head start. So the fact that BAC managed to achieve so much on that, I think, is really pretty spectacular. Feedback. Unfortunately, this lasted because things went rather unfortunately wrong. But this is typical of a sort of level of student feedback. Very high in terms of support, advice and feedback. A couple of comments. Feedback received was greatly appreciated as it caught out minor mistakes which enabled me to achieve a higher grade. It is one of the best modules I've ever had. And a parallel one which is the same but different topic slightly. Useful there. But also, the other thing that's really, really important is to have an incredibly high expectation of your student and convey it to them that they are going to do really, really well. And if you've done the numbers in learning analytics and you've been through it once or twice with the external, you can reassure them that this works for students. It works for them, that it will not be challenged under normal circumstances, or has not in the past been challenged by the external. So it builds the confidence. So using our numbers, which you just collect as part of the marking process, and then just analyse it. You can do it in a spreadsheet, ever so easily in Excel. You can convince yourself, with a little bit of analysis, that this is working. And then reassure both yourself and the students as they come into this very, very different way of working. For the first time students meet this way of working, they kind of get a bit nervous because they've never seen it before, probably. But this helps them to cope with the real challenge of learning by research rather than learning by being taught. It helps them not to get worried because you're not telling them all the answers, you're just giving them questions. So my reflection on what's happened: don't waste time on teaching facts. Teach the questions instead. Trust the students to research. Trust them to learn. Ask lots and lots of questions. try not to give any answers, because if I give you an answer, you stop learning. Spend your time coaching and mentoring. That's what they really, really need. That's what actually helps them enormously. Help them to develop all of their skills and try and also do not just studenting type of skills, but also skills for employability, skills which are going to help them when they get out into the big wide world. And learning by research helps them because they're not relying on the answers they learned last year or last week. Teach them how to find the answer to today's question in today's context. Go find the answers. Because in our field, I suspect many other fields around the university, around academia, the questions we are asking ourselves today are the same questions we asked ourselves 30, 40 years ago. I mean, in the field of IT and computing, they're the same questions, by and large. Different answers, different technologies, different all sorts of things. And also, in the world of work, always a different context. And just have staggeringly high expectations. And make them believe in it. Make them believe they can succeed. And then, they surprise themselves. They never knew they could be that good. And then there's a whole series of references. Plutarch and another couple of pages of academic, pedagogic sorts of references here as well, folks. As I say, the presentation is already available. If I go back to the beginning, do it. Yeah. If you go to that tiny URL there, that's my homepage on that website. And if you go about 2/3 of the way down through the presentation, to the conference presentations and so on, you'll find this is the last on the list, this section. And you'll get a link directly to the slides, so you don't need to have photos of them. They're all there, ready for you. And very shortly, this video will be available for you to have a look at as well. We'll put it up on YouTube there, and you better refresh your memory. Thank you very much, folks. Any questions?
I find your presentation very refreshing indeed, because you are giving us very practical ideas, something that really is doable. You said earlier on that your students actually edit work that is good with your students. How do you organize that?
At the end of the module, or a bit after I finish marking, I'll put out an email to all the students and say I want to volunteer. They know that it's coming, because I tell them on day one that this is what's going to happen. And then someone will almost inevitably volunteer to do that, because they get editing rights on a CV. It's kind of neat. And so there's always a volunteer.
Do you give them a specific criteria for editing? How do you
Well,
you train them to do that?
No, because all they've got to do is I download all of the Word documents that the students submitted, their assignments on, to turn it in. I pick out all the ones above the mark criteria, and then put it into a big fat zip file and email it off to whoever the volunteer is and say, I want to have it like this, and they can now go back and see what previous ones look like. In fact, if you really want to see...
Richard, just to make the point that I can see the next people are waiting to come in.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to...
Okay, so if you go to, well, to computing.derby.ac.uk and look for publications, you'll see the way to the OJS, our open journal system, and then you can have a look at some of the previous ones. And I just tell them this is what you need. So you've got to top and tail, you've got to remove tables of contents and a few other things, and then just input, sort of copy them in into this big fat document and do a few things, and maybe take out all of the references from all of them, remove the duplicates, and then put it at the back end. And so they know what they've got to do, and when they do that, they might design a new front page, changing colours or something, and then they produce a full document and turn it into a PDF and ship both of those back to me, and then I post them up here. That's so easy.
Sorry, that's very interesting. really learned a lot, and think I'll transfer to my students. What I was going to ask is, I've not heard you mention anything about serious academic offense, the expectations of students. Maybe it's not part of what you're doing, but this is what is my concern.
Right.
Because we are collaborative partners, and I have read through the policies of Derby, and I've not seen a particular subject that specifies that the student is only allowed to plagiarize 1%.
Okay, be very, very careful about that interpretation. What I say to my students from day one, the first semester, first year students, is that in the field of computing, and in most fields actually, there is nothing written in any of the textbooks or any of the journals which is worth quoting. Maybe in literature, English literature or comparative literature or law, it kind of is helpful. So I do not wish to see a single direct copy-paste. Because I have mental snowpage. I do not read quotations because that doesn't add to the work. And in my modules I have run here, and in previous modules, in previous existence, I have never, or have very, very, very few instances of plagiarism. Because of the intense reminder, almost every week, no quotations accepted. Just don't want to see them, it's a waste of your word, waste of your word count, or your page limit. And they get the message incredibly quickly. Because suddenly, if they've got lots of quotations, the question is, well, where's your contribution got to?